Hi everybody. So it's been a while since I made a video, and I hadn't intended to take a break, but we had this unbearable heat wave in the UK, and this room in particular gets furnace-like. It's like the boiler room of the Titanic or something. We have booked for air conditioning to be installed in all the sort of main rooms of the house, which should make the summer a lot more tolerable. So looking forward to that. Hopefully it's not too noisy. I wanted to talk today about something sort of quite personal, I suppose, but also just totally on the sort of pulse of the culture, and that is kind of body image, feeling ugly, and the whole GLP-1 of it all. Obviously, if you've watched me for any amount of time, you know I have a massive history of disordered eating, clinical eating disorders, major body image problems. I'm diagnosed with body dysmorphic disorder, and I've also got a stomach disorder as well on top of all this, which is really cool. I've been managing chronic gastritis for I don't even know how long, really. I got diagnosed with it in February, and it's been really rough. And I have toyed with coming back on camera the last few weeks because I have felt like I've gained weight, like I'm bigger than I want to be, and I think there's always this temptation, if you have any amount of public eye on you, even if it's just, you know, a couple hundred views, to want to present your best self and to kind of want to wait until you can present a version of yourself that you're satisfied with, that you find adequately presentable. And I have not felt that way. I have felt like I'm too big to be on camera, too fat, particularly in the face. My body dysmorphic disorder is largely a facial issue for me. It's to do with chubby cheeks, if you will, and like double chin and all that kind of thing. And I don't even really like talking about this, if I'm quite honest. I feel like speaking the truth about it is kind of already sort of validating the delusion, the distortion, or it just gives it a kind of reality that I go through my life trying to avoid. And it's hard. And I think one thing that I've seen a lot of talk about in recent times, and which I'm sort of going to share my opinion on, is Ariana Grande, if you will. Ariana Grande is a small-boned woman. She has appeared to become seriously emaciated over the last year or so, and I think I just want to talk about sort of how this strikes me as someone who has had anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and someone who is also you know, body dysmorphic about myself, about others, and how all of this right now is turning into just a huge cauldron of confusion about how to feel about myself, how I think bodies ought to look, how I think my body ought to look. And it's just been really, honestly, very confusing and weird, and I would be a liar to say I hadn't been looking up GLP-1 drugs, because part of me feels like the culture in general is just running away with whether this is healthy or not, or whether this is even intentional or not, as in, whether it's rational. There's a lot of people that have started on GLP-1s, presumably. I'm just making assumptions here. I know for instance that Kelly Osbourne started on GLP-1s when she first lost a lot of weight. And then obviously her dad died, and it's not clear to me whether the GLP-1s can explain the entirety of her weight loss, or whether they potentially triggered a kind of anorexia in her that then became reinforced by her inability to cope with grief. Obviously, I can't possibly know. I'm speculating, and I wish her the best. She looks to me to be suffering, and at this point, I'm not sure how much of the weight loss and the maintenance of that low weight is even really voluntary. And I think the same goes for Ariana Grande. I think at first, when we saw her doing the sort of wicked press tour and stuff, I think a lot of us thought, oh gosh, she's really, really slender. And you sort of think, oh, has she been kind of pushed into the GLP-1s as well? Like, I don't know, you just sort of think it's rife in Hollywood, and understandably so. It's the camera adds 10 pounds or whatever, and the temptation to be on a weight management drug to achieve a extraordinarily slender frame must be so, oh my god, I don't know how anyone in the industry avoids it, particularly with just how available the drug is. And obviously if you're a famous person, your access to any kind of drug is massively facilitated. It's it must just be so tempting to just take what you can. And I think reflecting on how this all makes me feel, I mean, would I say I am sort of hashtag triggered by it? I mean, I've always been circumspect about pointing the finger to anything kind of in the culture per se as reinforcing or causing my own body image problems. I would most certainly just say my own issues with food, with body dysmorphic disorder. They are largely just features of my personality, and in some ways your personality will seem to change as it relates to your environment. So one way in which this has manifested in my life is that when I was about 2 stone, 14 kilos, whatever, heavier than I am now, I was a lot more agreeable. I was a lot more deferential. I didn't really have the same amount of confidence to hold my ground, to negotiate, to even know that negotiation was an option for me. I didn't feel hugely powerful as a slightly overweight woman. And I think when I lost 2 stone quite a while ago now, a couple of years ago, I definitely felt a lot more power. I felt a lot more able to express myself. I felt far less shy in my opinions. I just felt far less like I had to sort of tread gently around people and sort of, make myself smaller in some ways to compensate for what was in fact, a sort of position as a woman in society, as a slightly bigger woman in society, where you feel like you have to make yourself a bit smaller and to almost make it clear that you realize that you carry a liability in being larger. And I think when you are a slimmer person, I don't know how many other people relate to this experience. I think you just realize that actually there's a certain invulnerability that comes with being slimmer. And I think this, at least in your own reasoning, you can take it to an extreme. And I think, you know, my life is complex at times, and I run a business, and it's got a lot of deadlines, a lot of important clients, and I think sometimes to feel like I want more control, I feel like being thinner would help me achieve it. And while that sounds completely ridiculous, it's something that my lived experience of being overweight and then being thinner and going on that journey and seeing how it changed my relationship to the environment, to interpersonal dynamics, to esteem dynamics. I think it showed me that being fatter meant I was more vulnerable. I had to make more concessions in negotiations, in just how I presented myself, the sort of things I would feel comfortable saying, the sort of space I felt able to take up, not just physically, but in terms of just my sort of fair share, really, of social life. And yeah, I think personally I have made the rather mistaken inference, and I have taken this to the degree of absurdity in my reasoning and in previous life, you know, when I was anorexic. You take it to an extreme, and it becomes this thing where you think, well, the thinner I am, if I get as thin as possible, that increasing invulnerability to criticism, to concessions, to all this stuff, there will be no ledge for doubt anymore. I will occupy that space with so much confidence. I couldn't be more confident if I am as thin as possible. There will be no room for criticism. There will be, yeah, I don't know how else to put it. I think being thin can come with just this idea that it will give you power. And I think that is borne out in normal experiences of weight loss, but also in the clinical experiences of weight loss when you tip into eating disorders. And I think that now we have access to GLP-1 drugs and related families of drugs. I mean, they're just about to bring out a pill version of the Wegovy injection. And I think that the proliferation of these pharmaceuticals it's actually highly concerning, because even in my own person, I have started to think that, you know, when I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety, a lot of work-related stress, and obviously having a stomach disorder, which has completely thrown my appetite into disarray for, you know, at the lower end and then at the higher end, and trying to find a way of managing that means I can remain at least on an even keel. I do think, like, these drugs, the thought that they're out there, they exist and they seem to solve this problem is hugely alluring. And I honestly would be lying to say I haven't looked into them. I would be lying to say I hadn't. And I think the safeguards around their provision is an interesting area. part of me is just excited and interested to see, can I get prescribed this? I mean, clearly it's being given to, you know, celebrities, people with the money to pay. I have the money to pay. I don't know who I need to talk to, where I need to go, but I do, you know, I am involved in you know, private prescription drugs. I have a few private prescriptions, and you do sort of think, you know, maybe I pursue this. Maybe this is a way of seizing a bit more control over my body, my life, my food, that has previously eluded me and has required, you know, ungodly amounts of willpower and destructive amounts of you know, motivation, if you will. So yeah, it's a weird time to be a recovered-ish person in the culture. It's tricky, and I feel for anyone actually who is kind of in my position, who does have a, you know, a body image problem. I obviously do have diagnosed body dysmorphic disorder. I'm not in treatment for it. I have a lifelong problem with anxiety, with this stupidly toxic level of hyperconscientiousness that just feeds into every part of my life, it seems. And yeah, I think recently I have just been feeling so exhausted from work, and so stressed and so exhausted, that you do start to think, you know, what can I do to gain control over my life, my look? Is there something I can do to sort of manifest a really sort of like quick glow up? And it sounds crazy, I guess, but you start thinking of all sorts of things. The GLP-1s, you start thinking of cosmetic surgery, you start thinking, you know, what else can I do, you know, in terms of like tweakments to my face and whatever. And a lot of this is probably just me being a crazy person still. And, you know, I'm 36 years old, turning 37 in October, and I would be completely lying to say that I liked or loved the way I look. I would say I am low-key terrified of aging. Obviously, aging has already started, and I guess I'm thankful that I have the money to do stuff about my changing face and hair and body. But it also scares me. It scares me what's available. And it scares me that I might not have the good judgment to know where to start or when to stop. And yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it at that, on that bombshell, I suppose. And I might humbly request your suggestions for things I can do to have a glow up. Things that aren't dangerous, ideally. I'm willing to spend money. I'm happy to spend money. I bought new sunglasses this morning. They're absolutely lovely. Yeah, I'm happy to do these things. I'm happy to, you know, I understand that taking care of yourself as a woman that, you know, wants to look nice and be attractive, and, you know, none of these things are abnormal. I won't hear that you shouldn't care what you look like. We do care what we look like. I care what I look like. I'm sure you care what you look like. Let's be realistic, but think of things that I can be doing to look better, feel better, and just feel like a less crusty version of myself who, I'm not gonna lie, is fully, you know, on the ledge and thinking of like taking the plunge on maybe some big decisions regarding, cosmetic stuff and, you know, weight loss stuff. It's a dark territory what's ahead, but I'm hoping that I can talk myself down from the ledge. So thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.